What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Writing Friction. And as always, the guest today is pretty cool. What's going on, Nathan Englander? How are you?
Good. Happy to be here. Thanks for getting up early in San Francisco.
Oh, we love it here. Well, as everyone knows in the podcast, Reba is with me. Um, as always, the bulldog. She was 5 months 2 days ago, so she doesn't go very far away from me.
Oh, a real puppy. Now,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
we have an old gray faced dog. My
So we were
cellmate.
talking before the podcast. You are not in New York City right now. You spent a lot of time in New York, but now you're kind of away from there. Where did you go?
Oh, yeah. My wife finished her PhD, and there was a really um, perfect match for her up in Toronto at York University. She does
Yeah.
a pretty hyper specific thing. Anyway, a dream job that opened up here, and I'm mobile. I can be
Yeah.
anxious anywhere, so I'll be anxious in Toronto.
Well, would
So
you
yeah,
ever consider yourself, looking through your works, are you a New York writer, or do you feel that? I mean, because again, we're two Jewish guys. We were talking
yeah,
about before the podcast, and these things kind of influence people's
yeah.
writings. Do you find that living in New York for so long kind of influenced your writing?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I'm such a New York loyalist, and it's especially intense year not to be there.
Yeah.
Missing home a lot, especially with our closed border.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm always that's an identity I take on very easily. Like I often feel like it could be a like an SNL game show, where they'd be like New Yorker Jewish, like so many
Mhm. Oh,
cultural things that we tie to like Judaism, like a certain way of being, are really like New York stuff. Again, different, all the cultural influences, but yes, I think a lot about me is very, 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 very New York, and I'm fully embrace that. And it's when I immediately get a hyphenated Jewish American writer thing where I'll get sensitive. Not that all my stuff, my stuff can't be any more Jewish. It's not literally not possible. But
uh,
I'm reading the Roth. They sent me the Roth biography that's
you put the
coming
words
out.
out of my mouth.
Yeah, I knew we would head there anyway.
Hmm.
But and I had a nice friendship with. But my point is, he was doing this a lot longer than me, which is this notion of, you know, uh, I think I get to be an American writer, and now with now I don't know if you've noticed, we have a white supremacist uh, leadership currently in America. But it's for the first time I've embraced the Jewish American thing. For all this time I'd
Uh-huh.
be like, I'd say again and again, my parents are born here, my great grandparents, like my family's been here longer than the presidents, like I must be American, I don't need a
Yeah.
hyphen. And now I say, right, with 10 yarmulkes stacked on my head. So there he is.
Well,
But
he's my favorite author.
yeah,
So when you just said you knew him, so obviously my antenna just went up.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, do you find that that was a thing in your earlier days of writing, of being afraid to be labeled as a Jewish writer, or was
No,
that a
no,
thing?
no, more like this idea that what it means to be American. Like
Yeah,
there is room for other, that the I just get into this idea of objectification and subjectivity, and this idea that I'm supposed to look at myself as other. That's back to when we talk about things that need to get fixed. That you're supposed to feel other, based on religiosity or sex. Like you're not you don't have to be a fucking hyphenate
yeah,
because you're you. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? Like that's what some people would like us to be. So I think for me, it was actually a surprise. I was just I knew in grad school I did, uh, the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is, a
it's the
writer
one, right?
factory. Yeah. So I loved it, so much, and almost had 100 nervous breakdowns there. But I definitely knew when I was working on like literary short fiction about Hasidim, like I definitely felt there, like, why am I such a weirdo? Like I had that
In the
feeling.
middle of Iowa.
Yeah, but I did feel when the book came out, when my first book came out, I was so thankful for everything that happened with it and the success, but like super shocked, if everybody's like, there's a Jewish American writer. I was like, where? Like it hadn't crossed my mind. I grew up in a very closed world, and that was my complete universe. And I didn't think of it as a like that I was a hyphenate, a kind of writer. I thought I was
Yeah,
just telling stories, which is the
yeah.
only way to do your work. So yeah, I feel like I spent the first 20 years of my career, which takes us right to now, being like, I'm an American writer, and I don't have to qualify myself. And as said, the current political moment has me, in a weird sense, swinging back the other way, which is like I'm as Jewish as they come.
Leaning hard into it. I mean, I'm buying challah every week just to make a point.
That's
Um,
funny.
yeah,
We eat
yeah.
lots of challah. That's my COVID body is like 80% challah. We eat
It's
a
just
lot of
a
challah
loaf
here.
of rolls of challah.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
so speaking, you're talking about your first book, and when you were writing that first book again, was this a conscious thing you were thinking about writing heavily in a Jewish world, or was it again was it just what you knew and it was easiest to write about?
It definitely wasn't easiest. Like it was. I'm a compulsive rewriter, like an obsessive drafter. Like
Yeah,
those stories, years and years per
yeah.
story. So, and tortured the whole way. Like I try and remember every once in a while I'll do something and be like, wait, that was fun. And I was like, remind oneself, like, oh yes, there's a different kind of fun. Like I love,
Mhm,
exercise. Like the gym's not fun, the bike's not fun, none of that's fun. But I was like, it's a different kind of fun where it's exhilaratingly fun.
mhm.
So yes, even tortured, there's nothing I love more than writing. But no, it's not. That's I think the point that we're sticking on, which is it's not a subject. Like that's the point. It's just I it's a complete universe, and I was writing about a complete universe, which happens to be the lens through which I see the world. And that's the point. Everyone's welcome to see me as Jewish and open this fiction and be like, wow, this is the most Jewish thing I've ever read.
Yeah,
And that's not what I'm thinking. I tell stories about people. That's what I'm saying. I would say we're not having a Jewish conversation, but we fully are. We're talking about being
we're two
Jewish.
Jews
But
from New York. It was
yeah,
inevitable.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but nonetheless, like that's the point. Like it's me and you talking. It doesn't have to be, it's not a qualified kind of talk.
Mm-mm.
Anyone else is welcome to like tune in being like, it's just two Jews talking. But
Literally, yeah.
but
Here we go
it's
again.
not how I have to feel while it's happening, you know, nor you. I don't know
Yeah.
if I did the wrong double negative, not neither nor. Anyway, yes.
Yeah, to stick on the Philip Roth thing, because obviously he's so easy to kind of revolve this world around. I mean, do you think maybe in your conversations with him, had he ever talked about, was this something you think he dealt with? I'm looking at Saul Bellows, book spines, there was a heavy area of Jewish
Oh
writers
yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah,
That's why I felt like he comes up a lot when I talk when we get to the subject because it's ridiculous like to not acknowledge, you know, uh, you know, how much he was wrestling with that,
mhm,
over time and before I was born. I mean,
yeah,
that's the first time we had any contact was before I met him was the friend who introduced us, the Hermione Lee, the extraordinary like thinker and biographer and who wrote the Virginia Woolf
yeah.
biography and the Edith Wharton biography. But I remember I'd gotten attacked in the newspaper for, some like this born again person decided to like go after me for like just standard, just
Yeah.
not. I remember being so sensitive. Like when things go well, then there's the swing back. Like someone just, it was just a nonsense, again, there can be a well-written attack piece and then there can be like it was just a nonsense thing.
Were
But I
they
remember
attacking? Were they attacking your writing?
no, my like writing in the Jewish part, you know what I'm
Got
saying?
it.
Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
idea, like picking
Yeah.
on, you know, whatever, like the dirty laundry front. I don't, again, writers never forget. I won't say I won't, thing, but I remember if we're talking about writers, I remember I was friends with David Foster Wallace at the end of his life, but I remember him quoting at length, he had such a great mind, but literally at length, a review verbatim, like, oh, I forget, I do remember, but it's his, anyway, but the book we were talking about, he's like, and then they said this, and then he read it from his brain, every word of the mean review.
Jeez,
Point
crazy.
is, general piece, but I just remember I was freaking out, and Hermione spoke to felt like, and it was I wrote it down, but it's written down somewhere because it's like, oh, it's the pre-start of our friendship, but he just said, like he'll get over it, like, and I just thought like, oh, I will get over it, like
Does
he's
that
already
kind of
been
stuff,
there.
does that ever affect your work at all? I mean, are you a kind of a routine kind of guy? It doesn't make a difference what's happening. You're always going to move forward, or do you kind of take that
Oh, this
sensitively?
uh as I talk to you from the by the furnace with my green screen on, that's I've
It
been
looks very
using that.
nice. I like the chair in the background.
Yeah, that's Georgia O'Keeffe's house. It's a very I don't like shout out to the Georgia O'Keeffe museum tour woman. I cannot stand the museum tour. I'm always like, speed it up, you know, hop to the end of that anecdote, keep it
Oh
moving.
yeah.
Like I want to do a museum my own way. I can't bear it. The only museum tour I like, I've done it twice, is the Georgia O'Keeffe
Okay.
house. Like, and I love
Enough
it.
to make it your background.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very calming place to me if I'm here by the furnace. But oh, I jumped away from the question. Tell me again.
It was. I mean, you're talking about David Foster Wallace able to dictate
Oh yeah,
verbatim.
dictate. Oh, that's
Yeah,
what I was
yeah.
going to talking about being in by the furnace, which is I've been thinking about it a lot lately, which is um I wish I turned 50 this year. I'll try
Congrats.
not to die of old age while during the interview, but it's a weird pivot moment for me. It feels really weird. I did back-to-back books, which never how it's not the way I work. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy that they'll be like 5 years, 8 years,
Were they both
6 years.
novels, or was one of them a short story
Both
collection?
novels, both novels. So Dinner at the Center of the Earth, and then this novel Cottage.com. I noticed with stories I always work in pairs. I didn't notice it when I was writing the first book, but these are the things that that as the years go by, you learn how your brain works. And I see I'm always working on two things. And Dinner at the Center of the Earth is such a hyper political novel where I really wanted to look at the failed peace process and Israel and Palestine. And then at the same time, I knew my brain sort of needed it. I was working on Cottage.com, which is sort of like a mystical Jerusalem, the spiritual place that belongs
Mhm.
to everyone and no one versus the fight.
Did you
So
split up your time evenly, or was it kind of like
no, not at all. I learned to go back. That's why I'm working on a story now. And I literally just started an essay and a different story. I'll just in the same file, I'll just move down, let the brain go like in a subconscious manner. Oh, but you're saying it's like I work through, I was in Israel, I moved there for the peace process. I like work through real violence, super present, super shook up, all that stuff. But I was like, I always say, just like literally like my windows shaking from the tank fire machine, like literally at the height of Intifada 2 at the real bloody start of it. I was like, you're there, you're present, you're in the world, and then I take this time to compose, or in New York for September 11th. I think of these sharp moments, historical moments, and I have to say the most the one that I find most pervasive is this, not in terms of personal feeling, not in terms of emotional commitment or political commitment, or me being active as me. You're asking about composition and creativity. I find the pandemic is extraordinarily. I just finished 3 projects. I had a play that was supposed to open last summer, which is now obviously not open. We were like 2 weeks out from rehearsal. So, so I had 2 books and then a play that's now frozen. But
Mhm.
yeah, it was a time to start new stuff. And I think I'm always tortured when I'm starting a brand new giant project, like finding my way into a book and then I forget it. That's another nice thing of the writing life, where like once you get into it, you become obsessed and you forget how
Mhm.
tortured you are when you were finding voice or finding structure. But I do think being in a world so extraordinarily uncertain, where I've been in places, you know what I'm saying? I like wrote that Dinner at the Center of Earth, that Israel novel. I was in Zomba, Malawi that year, and there was I thankfully was food secure, but there was a famine going on. I have written through extraordinarily sharp times, present and connected to the world around me, and then the hours that you take to compose, where you just somehow, that's your sanity or a way to, continuity to me, the same as yoga or religion or
Mhm.
whatever. That's what I do to keep going. And I find the like super global unknown and the state that America's in on top of it. I find this the most challenging thing to work through of my whole life. Just because how do you dream a world if the world you're in is, you know, dystopian? You're in San Francisco. I was there for the fires like 2 years ago for an event.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like
I was
when
wearing
I
my
got off
mask.
the
So yeah.
plane, I thought it was the fog. I'm used to landing in, San Francisco airport in the fog. And then I was like, oh my God, this is
Yeah.
smoke, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It
Um.
was so yeah,
So
it's just it's dystopian, and I find it and I'm an optimist. I want us to save the world, but it's a critical moment, and I find it, yes, especially overwhelming. And also I'm an office writer, to not leave the house. I'm very thankful, to have if you're food secure and have a roof over your head and you have your health now, like zip it. So I ain't complaining
Mhm.
about anything. But yes, parenting in this with littles, and no, I really am an out of the house writer. I find this I am working and building steam, but I find this the most confusing time to start new projects of
You
my whole
you,
life.
you enjoy writing outside of the house as specific. I mean, do you have places that you like to work specifically that you
Oh,
find?
I was there's my dog. I'm glad you have a dog. It'll be dog friendly. There she goes. But protecting us. I
Oh
hope it's
yeah, of
picking up. But yeah, I was a coffee shop writer for a million years.
course,
Love
yeah.
that. They just did the Hungar shout out to the Hungarian pastry shop on 111th in Amsterdam. But I lived in that neighborhood for a million years solely to be, I had my good friends up there. It was very much a Seinfeld setup. I always say if Kramer was a really successful pulmonologist, like, I had my buddy on the
And never
same
went to the Laugh
floor,
Factory.
and my friend around the corner, like it really, really was like a Seinfeld setup. But yeah, I wrote at the Hungarian pastry shop for a million years, and in Jerusalem, Tumultual Shom. Uh, David Ehrlich passed away this year, who started it with his buddy Dan, his partner. But yeah, I've always been coffee shop writers, and then as the years went by, I think the more I write, I think now I probably like mumble and laugh and read my dialogue out loud. Like I'd
Mhm.
probably seem in New York, that's fine because everyone's mumbling. And but yes, now I need private spaces. There was they did a piece on in what's it called, the Vulture, whatever, the New York Magazine thing. But yeah, the novelist John Ray in Brooklyn. My last office was John Ray has a lovely home there, and he so generously lets us all take rooms. So there
Oh
was a
wow.
bunch of writers. The last years, that was the best space. It was just an extraordinary. That's my favorite office that I've ever had. It was just all of us working in John's house
Are
in
you the
different
kind of
rooms.
writer who's gonna block off 8 hours a day to turn off your phone, turn off the Wi-Fi, block out? Or are you the kind of writer who's 30 minutes here, 20 minutes there, an
Oh
hour
no, no, I
here?
really think I see it as definitely, you know, I mean, job's not the word, but in terms like a practice. That's why I already compared it to religion and yoga. I need a million hours to do my hours. That was, may he rest in peace, but Frank Conroy would say to us, 3 hours a day of composition, 6 days a week. Like,
I
but
like that.
I believe in a pure composition block, and I really work towards that. And I scream at my students. I'm on faculty at NYU, and I yell at them all the time.
Mhm.
Like the device stuff now, they've really worked hard. Like I am fully addicted now, and I am working on it. Like the level of interruption I have, what's it called? Not freedom. I have a different one now, but I like shut off the internet.
Got it.
I may even buy one. My wife's like, just give me your phone. I may buy one of those phone jails. But in a moment where it's this with a pandemic and political upheaval, we're on the edge, of an autocracy, or maybe we're across it if you talk about not transferring power. He gets enough time. But I'm just saying, I am really addicted to the internet. And right now I'm off Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm off everything. And then I'm like, let me just look at the Reddit
Hop right
homepage
back
for one
in.
second. And
Yeah.
as soon as I hit the Reddit homepage, literally like
Over.
dopamine, serotonin, I don't know what chemical, super rush. Like I could go down that rabbit hole.
What
I find it really hard to shut down, but I desperately believe for composition that you need peace and silence. So I am much like getting back in shape. Like we have a new he's one now, but I'm saying when with a move and a kid, like the gym, which was central to my life, truly fell off in the move. Like I'm getting back in shape, and I feel like I'm also getting back in writing shape, where it's like you must not,
Mhm.
refresh your email for 10 minutes, then get it to 30, then get it to 40. Like I'm doing that stuff.
And you're talking about composition specifically, right? Because
Yes.
earlier in the conversation, you were talking about simply just living your life and gathering information that way too for your work, just existing in the world, right?
Yeah, which I find torture. Like I know writer friends who like finish a book and then like I'm gonna take some time, I'm gonna take some long walks, I'm gonna do some, whatever it is, topiary.
Yeah.
Like this I, I'll bake some breads. I baked a lot of bread at the start of the pandemic, but I'm not good. My wife's like, it's been 20, if you start like even before graduate, it's probably like a 25-year practice. She's like, it is literally okay if you're taking the end of this crazy summer to like think a little bit. But
Mhm.
I feel so fortunate. All I ever dreamed of was writing. It always felt extraordinarily impossible to do. It doesn't feel, I never take it for granted. And the notion that I'd be like fiddling with a piece or thinking and collecting ideas, that's very sort of unsettling to me. And I'm trying to sort of relax into that right now, which is like, two books and a play, I keep saying in a Frozen play, but nonetheless, that I did 3 projects
That's not
back to back.
called Frozen.
Yeah, exactly. But not I saw Frozen on it
Oh,
was excellent, I have
yeah.
to say, with my daughter and her friend. I didn't not go by myself, though you're
Uh,
welcome to. I went to Disney. There's grown-ups there alone. I'm interested in that, but nonetheless. Anyway, but yes, I'm trying to feel comfortable with absorbing this moment and trying to make sense enough of where we are in the world to yes, to dig into these other projects.
and once you have that project in your head, it's kind of just straightforward. That's what you're locked on.
I'm bad enough at email, and I'm so thankful for like the people at my publisher at Canop, my publish and Vintage for 20 years now and whatever, where they'll have to like I'll not answer 9 times, and they're like,
Yeah.
you're talking to Michael in the like, please just. So I'm bad enough at like email. I'm
Yeah.
unfindable. I don't answer my all that stuff. But yeah, once it takes over, then I have to remember to like try to have like good hygiene, like brush your teeth or like eat. I just
Yeah. Yeah.
well
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
sadly I don't forget to eat candy bars, but I'm just saying that once it takes over, then it's like so all consuming. And I say to my students, because that's a beautiful thing to me about the creative process, once once the book takes over, then it feels like good fortune and miraculous. Everything you do in the world, I'm like, did you say 5-month-old puppy? That's a miracle, because I was looking for the age of a puppy for my book.
Cool.
Like,
And I talk about this with a lot of authors. It's being able to just take all that extra stuff that's coming around you and being able to take little snippets and just use it for your own work. Like I was talking to Rebecca Mackay, and she was talking
yeah,
about standing in
oh,
line
she's awesome.
yeah, standing in line at a Starbucks and how boring that could be. But at the same time, when a character walks in and stands behind you, you could turn around and be like, that was just the character or
Yeah,
changing a character to make it be like that person.
yeah, it just you feel lit that way, and then it all pours in. And then
Yeah.
I'm a big editor. Like I'm obsessed with compression. So that's it.
Mhm.
All that stuff feeds in, and
Mhm.
then I'm like, okay,
Cutting the
here's
shit out.
yeah, and then there's 34 pages on whatever it is on a fire hydrant, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna keep the puppy and lose the fire hydrant.
I mean, did that take you? Because I'm a fairly new writer, and I'm just getting over the ego of getting rid of old shit when you're going through drafts of things. Did it take you a long time to get comfortable of just cutting stuff out that wasn't working?
I'm I think I've always, a friend says it about me that, which I appreciate it. Like you said it like 20 years ago, but I always think about it where he's like, sort of like Nate writes okay, but he rewrites like a motherfucker,
Yeah.
like, and I feel like that's where I do my real work. So
Oh
for me
yeah.
early on, it was very clear. I know that's where my work gets done. So it was very
Definitely.
early for me, but I guess I don't understand people. Don't you want something to find its truest form? Like I keep a graveyard of all that's, or it's not a graveyard, it's more like a Sheol, a limbo space, like a zombie. Like I keep those lines, I keep those
Mhm.
chapters. Like sometimes you go back and grab
Yeah.
one, but I don't understand the piece should be what it needs to be. Like I think it's a strange, I don't care about your time. I don't care about your efforts. I care about only the story. And I don't understand why, if you have, even if it's a pretty strong joke or a pretty stunning description that we don't need, why you would want to have a worse piece because of your
Mhm.
vanity that you need to
Mhm.
have it in there. Darren Strauss has a new book out, the novel Queen of Tuesday. His new book is out. But there's these wonderful interstitials, like these little tiny pieces of, you know, memoirish stuff, a paragraph, a page. And I told him how much I love them. And I knew he'd written like, whatever it is. He had like a 500-page book version of the book, and this is the 250-page version. And, I think it was more like 600 and 300. But, his editor got him to cut out the 300 that don't fit. And this thing that I really love in his book is 300 pages cut down to like, I think he got to use like 8, 10. But I'd say, like, would you want some slog of a novel that, I remember him telling me I hadn't read it yet. And I said, like, listen to your editor friend. If someone
Mhm.
finds a cut that big, there's something there, and his book is so much better for these little pieces in there. And I can't even imagine where you'd be like, oh, this book should have been the alternate universe, where you'd be like, man, this should have been half as long and I'm out of here.
I, I like to think I'm a reader first,
Yeah.
and there's a couple of books that I have. I already mentioned his name. and we're talking about it specifically, but I had to put down two of his books. Saul
Yeah,
Bellows. I think
yeah,
Saul Bellow is a amazing writer.
yeah.
But when I was reading Herzog, there are parts of this book I'm just like, what am I doing? And then I loved it. I kind of put it down to the side. I'm like, maybe it's just me. Let me get Humboldt's Gift. And I picked up Humboldt's Gift and I'm reading. I'm like, this is just me. I'm like, there's 100 pages of this book that could have just been cut out.
Well, that
Like,
I never. Yeah.
Continue. I mean, if you did, please disagree with me. I mean,
No, no. I never
yeah.
talk. I'm like, I always say I look like bad taste reader because I'm so polite. I'm like the meanest reader, but I never say, we'll be going around the table. I'll be like, I loved it, even if I hated it. Like I'm just so sensitive about writers' lives. But it's Humboldt's Gift, like that. That's the professor one. Like it's the tone. That's an interesting one for me. Like it's people are based on people. It is not the kindest tone. I'm very interested in the tone of that novel. I go back to it a lot to look at the way he talks about that professor and the way.
I mean, it's genius writing.
I mean, it's a narrator, but I'm saying it's pretty intense. It's a tough.
And then you also mentioned in the opposite side of this, would Infinite Jest have been the book it was if they had cut out the 500 pages that might have been cut out of that book? I mean, so like.
No, this is, I guess this is where I'm always turning to my religious self, which is books are perfect to me. That was a weird thing. Did my voice just break? Books are perfect to me, but they are perfect to me. Like they take on their true form. So that's it. I just feel like part of the experience, like there are pacing issues, like they need, I don't know, once a book is bound and published, when it's in its final form, and whether that's, as I said, kindled and published or whatever it is. But I think if it's working, then that's what it needed to be. Like if I loved it, then I won't think, what I'm saying? I love Moby Dick and I want 400 pages of reflection,
Oh yeah, of course.
about industrialization.
It wouldn't be the same
while we're
book.
floating. No, yeah, I that's what I always think. Or like Murakami, I always go back to the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. I'm like, did you make spaghetti and then drop us into a pit for 100 pages out of nowhere and then just hop back? And I was like, I guess I really I love that book. And I was like, I guess we needed to do that.
Well, one of the books I read recently that's the total opposite of this, that kind of got my blood flowing in a way it hadn't really. I don't know if maybe you don't read this stuff, and it was the first book I had read in a while. A.J. Finn's The Woman in the Window. And have you heard of that book?
No.
Okay. It was pretty popular like a year or two. I think they're making a movie out of it. Yeah. But it's a straight ahead suspense thriller. And the way he writes is some chapters are 2 pages, right? And it's three words to a sentence, and you're kind of like always on the edge of your seat. Yeah. And there's a part of me that likes that kind of book and that kind of reading. But like you're saying, there's also going to be a part of me where I want to be dropped in that spaghetti bowl and kind of, look around and what the fuck is actually going on in here. It's amazing how some authors really, is it a style thing, you think? Is it kind of just they want to say it, they're going to say it? Like when we're talking about writing an 1,100 page book, like Shogun.
It's a style thing when it's working, and then it's an editing problem when it's not. Like that's the whole point.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, have you had people in your authors that you're friends with? Is this a common thing to run into editors who are? It's a kind of a push and a pull, and you really want.
I guess I never understand that. Like I see, my obligation so much to story. The idea if you're getting to work with someone who gets you, like that's thrilling to me. I always say like another thing that I scream at the students, but I'm like, it's just yes, no, maybe. I am hypersensitive once the book comes out. Then I'm like this delicate flower, if anyone, if even a big compliment, if like there's something, I'll like find something in it to like take, have my feelings hurt. But when I'm working on something, it's a project and I just want to hear everything. So for me, it's just, I don't understand the idea if you're working with the right person who like gets your work, why you wouldn't want
Mhm.
to. That's like gold and
That's the
extra
whole
brain.
point. I mean,
I'm
it's
jealous
like
of
a
the
good
TV
marriage.
people to have like a writer's room. Even, I said that to the actors and like we had a workshop, not, we didn't start final rehearsal, but we did a week of workshop last December in New York. And I was like, God, I wish I had you all at home. Like, I'd love it. The idea to have all these people reading your lines and,
Oh
the
yeah.
actors challenge you, not just the director. I'm saying the actors will be like, why am I saying this? I'm like, this is, yeah, it's very isolating, novel and short story writing. The idea that someone comes in, like Jordan Pavlin, who's been my editor this whole time, she's just a genius. And yeah, if she gives me 1,000 comments, I take 995 straight off. I argue 5, I give in on 4, and then I know the one that I'm fighting for. Like that's what I'm saying. Back to that extra 100 pages in a book or whatever. If I say yes to everything because everything makes the story better. And if I
Mhm.
can't say yes to it, I really think about it. And so, yes, I'm sure there are people. I have friends who wrestle with editors, but I feel like somebody shouldn't be with somebody if it's such a fight, or you need to take a look at why you can't,
Definitely.
reflect on your own work.
We're running out of time on this Zoom. You want to do another one real quick? You got some more time to
Yeah,
talk,
yeah,
or
I have time if you want
all
to.
right, cool.
Is my
Yeah,
point.
before we got cut off, you were talking about well, really the words you write now being spoken out from actresses' mouths, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I did so my first play, like this story just has been with me my whole life. It was the one I sent to grad school, and the one, was like the first, and it was the first story in my first collection. Anyway, the story, The 27th Man, which then became my first play, which opened at the Public Theater in, I don't know, like 2012 or something. But
Where's the
oh,
public theater?
the Public Theater in New York.
Oh, it's in the city. Okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's like that's Joseph Paps there.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
yeah. The Public is for people. It's Shakespeare, and the
Mhm.
Park is them. Chorus Line, a little known play called Hamilton, which has done quite well. Point is this: there's just legendary stuff.
Yeah, most
They're
definitely.
amazing, amazing, amazing. Under the Radar Festival, love me the Public. Um, so, oh yeah, that process was just fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, the writing life, I guess I'm so focused about it and obsessive. Like I was always like, I only write literary short fiction, like just short stories. And then I was like short stories and novels, like, but
Mm.
only fiction. The idea of like changing forms, I was like, I'm not a playwright in any of that stuff. Um, but yeah, learning the form. I mean, I'm still obviously learning the form. It's just fascinating, but getting to switch and have to learn just just a whole extraordinarily different set of rules.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I would say the tightest short story in the world, that your eyes will bleed from boredom on stage. It's just the timing's different. The dialogue works differently. The rules of drama work differently, like how
Mhm.
characters transform, nuance, subtlety, all that stuff. So I just that was a life-changing experience, not only the experience with the play, but it changed the way I write fiction. So when I had the opportunity to write, and have a second play produced, I jumped on the chance. So yes, it's I just love that room. I love working with people. I love all the brains. Like
Mhm.
it's just with a fiction writing, I got to build the sets and I've got to do the weather and the lighting, and I'm a costumer. It's everything is just you. This notion that like other people, just brilliant, brilliant people, are building it with you, that is, I just love the community of it, and I love the intensity of it, and I love the real time of it. And also, I think even for me having back to back books, I think it just changed the way I execute some. I mean, you'll be there, and the director of this is I'm working with Barry Edelstein again, who's amazing, who's the artistic director at the amazing Old Globe Theater in San Diego. But it's that idea where if something's not working, Barry will be like, "Okay, let's take 5.
Mhm.
Give me 3 jokes." Like
Yeah.
I never do that kind of work where I'm like, "You have 5 minutes, and people are gonna hear them in real time." Like even that room, what I'm
Oh
saying, just
yeah.
wanting to be like, I guess I need a laugh, and I need it in 5 minutes, and it has to fit right into this spot that's super tight. I've got to
Mhm.
crowbar a joke in there that has to not feel crowbarred in. And
You think it's like being like a TV writer or something like that?
Yeah, maybe more like a stand-up, I mean,
Okay.
maybe it'll be like, make everybody cry you have 5, but that's it. I remember, nights where I'm like, I think, when you look at all the writers who've been journalists and stuff like that, how much I'm always, admiring of friends who were journalists because I'm like, oh, they learned to close.
Yeah.
I just had a piece in the Globe and Mail up here, not really a news oriented one, but it's like I've written op-eds for the Times, and I remember the first time where I'm like, oh, back to learning to fall in love with forums. Like, I want to write an op-ed for the New York Times. Like, I have these opinions and I'd like
Yeah.
to share them. And I remember sending the first one in that I worked so hard on and getting like a nice note back of like, oh, this is really nice and really would have been good 2 weeks ago when it was news. I was like, oh, I guess you can't work
Got it.
on a
Boom, boom,
yeah,
boom.
yeah. Like you can't respond to the news 2 weeks later. So
Yeah.
so
What
I
you're
feel like
talking.
it's like a stand-up, like a tight five or something like that, where it's like you're gonna go and something's happening. You're like, then there was somebody's joke last night that a friend texted me after the debate. Like fly lands on Mike Pence's head, and then somebody sends me this guy. I'm like, oh, that's a joke writer. Like it
Mhm,
literally just happened, and this
mhm.
comedian like got that joke out there. Like I could feel the process. Like he sat down and he wrote 50 of these
Oh
in 10
yeah.
minutes, picked his best one, and it killed, and he sent it out. But anyway,
Well, and
but
comedian, and I feel like that gets a lot too. I'm a big fan of stand-up comedians, but comedians are writers too. They're writing these
yeah, no,
things
I'm
down.
obsessed. I'm obsessed with comedy writing right now. I'm just the process. I've been listening. There's a do we shout out to other podcasts or you're
Definitely,
sending
yeah.
me
Why
like
not?
okay, like me writers where you're like, I'll always be like, what?
What was it
There's
called?
another writer. Oh, it's called the Good One Podcast. But
Okay.
but when you love an episode, I truly love it. Like he starts with a joke and then like he plays the comedian's joke and then they unpack it for like an hour.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
just
great.
it's a really good anyway, I like to hear about process, why I'm excited to do your podcast. I like to talk about, I was gonna say I've never by the way, when you're talking like this, it's so out of body. I'm like, how the sausage gets made. I'm like, I have heard that phrase. I've never said it before, but
Mhm.
I'm saying it now. Oh, what I wanted to say to you about like not even closing in the moment, like needing to close. Like we're in rehearsal that New York week, and we spend say 3 days of a 5-day workshop reading through the play with the actors. And on Friday we're gonna have a public reading, and we've now worked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and everything's union. You don't get extra hours. It's to the minute. We're taking a 10.
Oh yeah.
Back to not having a real job where I'm sitting now, as I said, I hope you can hear the furnace turned on. I hope people will hear that in the background a little. The mic shouldn't pick it up, but maybe it will. But
It's coming out of the little stereo system that we
yeah,
see in the
exactly.
bookshelf
But
back.
uh so like we get to Wednesday and this thing that I'm a fiction writer that I've worked on, I've been rewriting for the last, 6 or 7 months at that point, just 7 months of rewriting, play's not that long, just round the clock. And we get there and the endings just, it doesn't hit. It hits on
Uh-huh.
paper, like back to different forms. It was working on paper for me and the people who read it and for the director. When it got said out loud, I'm like, this is not it.
Wow.
The director, that's why when you talk about the editing process, you don't have to tell me, I'm there. That's it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, is everybody crying? Like you're supposed to have the wind knocked out of you now. And that idea that it's like that I stay after with the director and we just talk and try and figure it out and then go home with the homework where this thing that's years into writing and months into rewriting and that we're going to have the first, public read of on Friday. I've got one night and it's like find the ending, you know, make it work. And I just, to me, that's dizzying as a novelist. And I love that I can stay calm and I'm like, I will write till dawn. Like
Mhm.
I have till 10 a.m. to get these pages. I was like, it's just going to be a long night and you'll go hour by hour. And to me, that was such a good craft lesson that like, just not to panic. Like I was just like, I'm just gonna sit here. We're in an Airbnb with my, wife and the baby's real. Like I have a 6-month-old then and a
Mhm.
4-year-old then. Like I'm like everyone's, I'm just gonna sit out here at this, IKEA Airbnb counter and just like that idea where I was like, it's midnight, and the director, he's such a Barry's so dedicated. I get a text from him at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, like, how's it going? Like he's waiting. And it just I don't remember. I must have written it down somewhere or noted it, but yeah, probably around, somewhere between 1 and 3. Like I'm like, I got it. I guess I get to
Uh-huh.
go couple of hours. Like that is such a good lesson for a fiction writer to just that even like these things that could seem impossible. I'm like, if it was a book, I'd be like, this may take 6 months. Like that idea that I have a night and that your brain can find it in a night
Mhm.
if it needs to.
Well, to go back, you said you had a lot of reverence for your friends who were journalists before they started
Yes.
writing. I spoke recently. Do you know Eowyn Ivy?
No.
She wrote a book. Well, you were nominated for a Pulitzer Prize.
Yes, I was.
Her novel, The Snow Child,
Yeah.
had been nominated for a Pulitzer, I think in 2012 or 13. But
Yeah.
she spent 10 years as a journalist before she
Yeah.
wrote any fiction.
Yeah.
And the way she talked about it was she was like, that was just sharpening it was like you had to come into work, you had a deadline every day, boom, 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 get it done. Next day, do the same thing. And
Yeah.
she said for her work, that helped her with her discipline a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And I'm super gonna read Snow Child now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I haven't read it yet.
yeah, no,
That's where I shine as a TV raise. That's where I shine is falling behind on books.
it's so tough. I mean, it's so tough. Like, Richard Powers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he wrote that book, The Overstory.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and I'm trying to get him on the podcast, and I'm talking to him via email. And he literally lives in like Southern Appalachia. He has like no service, and and the things I want to ask him about that book was just like, kind of the same thing. Just you know, he lives in Southern Appalachia. Eowyn Ivy lives in like the wilderness of Alaska.
Yeah.
And they live in these super isolated places, and they write about super isolated places. By you living in New York, you're living in a living, breathing world that's giving you
Yeah.
characters all the time.
Yeah.
I'm curious if for her, and I would ask her again, as being a journalist, which she, living with such little visual stimulation, is she able to really just pick out like, a tree rustling on the branch, and then she can
Oh,
go,
but I said everything, like there's a plus and minus to everything. Like it's a diehard New Yorker. I love it, but I'm sure it increased my anxiety like tenfold. Just, that speed that I love, or living in a big pile of writers that I loved, like this. I mean, Toronto, I was just starting to get into the
yeah,
scene here when like just literally starting to like I still hold this one dinner invitation I was so excited about that got COVID canceled. But I think about that like I wouldn't have finished. I wrote that rewrite of that Dinner at the Center of the Earth novel, like I said, in Zomba, just sitting on the Zomba plateau, like which runs at a very very different speed, and
hmm
like everything is a gift and a challenge, like in terms of space. So yeah, I think sometimes it's crazy for writers to live in New York. It's so expensive, it's so challenging, all that stuff, but it's also, as you said, like very invigorating. But uh I am embrace change often, and as I said, like as someone in a new city now and on lockdown often in that new city, it's like, yeah, I think that quiet also feeds hugely. There's a reason, uh I mean that, so many writers split their time, but I don't know if I do good with extreme isolation without a cap on it.
uh-huh.
So,
Well,
like
you lived
that
in
show
Israel.
alone.
You lived in Israel for a couple of years.
uh a bunch, like five straight, and there was
Oh
a
wow!
5 or 6 or more than that.
And you were writing during that time, correct? Right?
Yeah, that's where I went right after. It was like within 2 weeks of finishing my MFA. I like just but it's thank you for that transition, as I was like stumbling trying to get that point out. But it really was a thing where it's like living in this hive of writers in grad school where you're just all together and just feeling it deeply, and it was really competitive, and then to just pick up and go to a place where I was not connected, and
uh,
you know just start a life there again, like that, wanting to be in a city that to me was really exciting. I know everyone loves Tel Aviv, but it was the peace process time, and I just wanted to be in Jerusalem, and it
yeah.
was this really exciting time that also was a very violent time, but nonetheless, yeah, I just wanted to do my work, and I was like, I didn't have any plans for it to work out. I had dreams, but I really did think it was impossible. But I was also dedicated to the process. Like that's all I cared about was writing. It just seemed that yes, that change was super fruitful for me to just go there and live extraordinary simply and It's different if you can't get work. I don't know if I could have gotten work, but to be, broke by choice is a different thing than to,
Oh, big time.
so yeah,
Yeah, I moved here to join a rock and roll band 9 years ago, and I did.
yeah,
And I toured for like 5 or 6 years, and I got into
cool.
writing about 2, 3 years ago. But you're right; it's a different thing to be broke by choice.
Yeah, it really is. Like I don't like fake, my wife's really, especially considering her uh work. She does educational policy, studying
Yeah,
anthropology, but yeah, she doesn't like fake complaints of, yes, there are people who are face real challenges.
yeah.
I'm oft reminded. But yes, that was a time where it was like, just living really, really basically by choice to just work. I just wanted to, polish up those stories.
Yeah. What I find it super interesting about you is and correct me if I'm wrong, but you kind of started in the short story realm,
Yeah.
and then you moved to novels. Were you
Yeah.
always writing long form fiction before, or did you start writing short
No, I
stories
mean,
and stuff with?
I'm sure yeah, who knows what I was doing like in high school and stuff when
Yeah,
hundreds of pages of who knows what.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean that was it. Like in college, yeah, I definitely, oh my God. My wife, and back to, John Ray, this is I'm literally erasing. I'm not even going to tell you any of it because it's so embarrassing. But we were packing up to move to Toronto, and my wife found like this horrible novel that I wrote junior year of college, like a real, you know, 1920, embarrassing, heartfelt novel that, written in like 4 to 10 weeks, like that kind of
Hmm.
thing. But yeah, I've never seen, it was at my expense. I have never seen two people laugh harder than they did, like flipping through that.
Oh
So
yeah.
no, but yeah, once I decided like I'm gonna do this, I'm dedicating my life to writing fiction. It was the story. I really love that form, and it was the story that I was dedicated, obsessed wholly with short fiction. Yes, for years, and then knew I wanted to write novels after. So I don't feel forced. I don't care about anything. Like I missed the deadline on my second book. Probably I was like, it's just in a Monty Python way. It's only 5 or 6 years late. I hope that's not a problem. I think I was 6 years late.
Were you reading short story collections, or was it kind of just
Yes, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
what were
yeah.
you reading?
Devouring everything I get my hands on.
Yeah,
Like just
like
yes.
John Cheever, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love, back to changing canons and all that stuff. But yes, reading broadly and widely, but like I still make students read Cheever a lot.
Uh-huh.
You know, my main Cheever point is you
Cheever
know,
point.
yeah, is that he probably like I don't know what if he still holds the record, like he was just pumping out stories for
Oh
the New
yeah.
Yorker. But in terms of what it needs if you're going to have a regular short story out there, like I just feel like people, I call it like out sophisticating themselves, where they're too cool to tell you what the fuck is happening in a story. And I'm like, I know this is really slick and sophisticated, but I literally don't know what's
I have no
happening.
fucking clue.
Yeah. and
Yeah.
i and what I love about Cheever is he will just always say like, you know Michael and Nathan were talking, they are
Doing
two Jews.
this. Mhm.
Like he is in Toronto, Michael's in, they both are in black office chairs, and Nathan is rocking right to left,
Mhm.
repeat, like just everyone, you open it and I was like, oh, you would be self-conscious to type it. Like if you were like grad student, you'd be like, oh, this is
It's so
embarrassing
weird.
obvious.
It's so
Like
weird.
yeah, and then but when you read the story, you don't notice anything except that it reads like butter, and it's just I know who's in the room, I know what the room looks like.
Mhm.
Sometimes I see the non-working version where they're like, his nose was like a walnut and his ears were dangly. It's like you don't have to describe every face of
No.
sometimes that sticks out for me and kills me, but Cheever is just like the maestro of just setting the scene again
Mhm.
and again and again. So yes, I think like that's you want to take a class, you don't want to pay for school right now, like I just always say, like read the collected stories of John
Cheever.
Cheever,
I
like
mean, yeah.
get the Borges, get the Flannery O'Connor, like just whatever you want,
Yeah.
get Shy Agnon, like do the Calvino, like whatever, just go.
I wrote a short story, my first short story about a year ago, and submitted it to the New Yorker, and got rejected. All good, but what I did was, I, Adam Johnson.
Yeah.
So he actually lives like 4 blocks from me. I feel like I
Uh,
talk about this dude every fucking podcast.
yeah,
But he wrote Fortune Smiles, a
yeah,
collection of short stories. And that had been the first collection I had read in a long time. And having never written a short story in my life, like seeing that form and now knowing how to write myself and teaching myself writing, I kind of fell in love with it. And I wrote like 2 more short stories. And now I've been on like a big short story kick. I'm gonna pull it up now. I'm about to finish. Have you read this?
I knew where you were headed. I was
Yeah.
just gonna
So
say, I wish I had said, like, when do we get to Jesus' son?
I'm,
That was came out. Was it came out in like 92 or
I'm
90?
looking. I could look. Yeah. It was definitely before Tree of. It was his first book, I think.
No. There was
Was it?
no. He had a few books. I think he needed some cash and had to deal
Oh
with
yeah, you're right. You're
FSG and
right.
like put this collection. Like it has a really awesome, badass Dennis Johnson origin story.
You're right.
But
92.
92, yeah, because I started grad school in 94 and that was like our Bible. That
Mm,
was I read that's the book I mean, I love Camus' The Play. I'd say the book the I don't read quickly enough to go back to books because I
uh,
can't
yeah.
afford it. I mean, I'm doing it a little also during the pandemic just to get my brain back.
Yeah.
Like, but in general, I don't reread books. I used to reread The Plague because I love that so much, and I
Mhm.
reread Jesus' Son because
I
I
mean,
love it so
and,
so
and
so
and
much.
you're, but it's talking about he did this. They're in the car. They're doing, and these stories are kind of like that because I mean, some of these stories are only 7 pages long.
Yeah,
They're very short for short stories. But yeah, that whole world of just in a short story you have to. It's like journalism. You got to get to the point, kind of.
yes,
And the endings of short stories have always kind of fascinated me. I feel like some books, they really wrap it up well. It's how it is. Sometimes they don't, but short stories, for the most part, I feel like kind of just cap it off. Now it's over. Bada bing,
yeah.
bada boom. Do you like to write that? Do you like to end your stories that way? Do you not end your
I
stories
don't
that
believe in
way?
like a too tight a knot. Like this is I'm like pausing because I'm like this is where the podcast what you'll just cut off. You'll just slowly move the puppy
Say, no,
and
don't worry.
amble
Don't worry.
away. Well, I have like I deeply believe in a fictional reality being a reality and how it
Yeah.
gets constructed. I have a 9-hour theory that I will spare you on this notion,
Next
but
podcast.
I like this idea of like reality moving out that you have to a story like needs this it needs absolutely like you have to have this closure and I think it should knock the wind out of you but on both fronts is like I don't like it tied up too neatly because that's unreal like we don't get I say this conversation you and I are meeting now so
Mhm.
there's what hopefully makes it of remote interest to someone is like two people communicating what we're missing all this stuff.
Yeah.
I like negative space and I also when I say I want the wind knocked out of you I really do want this like deep I want you to be changed as a person forever when a story is done. But I also one must be careful. There's one collection that was also like really big during my grad school days where I feel like it was overly epiphonic, where I'm like, it was too neatly, there was, it was like, and epiphany, you
Mhm.
know, there's infinity pitfalls to talk about. But yes, I love this compressed time, this compressed experience, and then this just, you know, sort of, yeah, life changing. I feel changed when I finish stories. I really do believe in that form where I feel like there's as many stories that have affected me and altered who I am as a person. Like maybe there are more stories than novels that have done that. I really do love that form. And again, I've just been away from it for years. I'm really excited to like it feels like starting at square one. I'm sure that knowledge is in there, but as I get back into story shape, it's
Mhm.
really like I feel like I'm learning it all over again.
Have you ever been working on a story and thought maybe it can get into a novel or you can blast it off into a longer form?
Oh, I have two things like back to mentioning like mentioning Roth, but I remember once he liked a story, that he'd read in the New Yorker and he's like, this should be a novel. And I was like, and that takes us right back to grad school where I'm like, that is a compliment that I appreciated.
He was
But I
talking
knew
about your work.
yeah, but he'd
Uh,
read the stories like, oh, you should totally write this into a novel. And I was like, thank you very much. because in grad school there'd been a story where, there'd been support and everyone's like, oh, this should be a novel. And then I spent 6 months
Mm.
writing it into a novel. And then I'm like, well, now I know what the next draft of the story needs to be. And I learned that that's a compliment, which is, if it needs to be a novel, it will be a novel. If I write it as a short story, that's because I can contain it with a short story.
Yeah.
And if someone finishes that short story and wishes there was more and says this should be a novel, then that's a really lovely compliment,
Uh,
and not to be mistaken as the need to take something that you executed in 15 pages and now executed in 500 pages.
well,
Again, sometimes that changes. Jumping off points, I forget which play it is. Like maybe there's like the Glass Menagerie, the short story, like, and I was like, wow, that's a crazy notion. Like, and I know both of the plays that I have, I've written off short stories, and I feel like, is it Faulkner was what's it called, Barn Burning, um
what do you mean?
the short story. I feel like
Oh,
the Snopes trilogy, like that became the Hamlet. I love those books. I feel like maybe those started as that one short story and then became a trilogy.
mhm.
If something grows, great. If it grows in your brain and then needs to be something else also amazing, back to when we are talking about short stories, I didn't get to mention, which I just um, was thinking about, but the uh, good fortune I had to study with James Allen McPherson, like his collection, Elbow Room, which is so amazing and important. But but like Marilyn Robinson, where this idea grew into, just book after book, like,
Mhm.
and I love watching an idea grow in someone's mind like that, like these literary series of books. It's like a gorgeous notion, but no, I don't think uh every story needs to grow into a novel, that's for sure.
Well, since we're talking, I mean, it seems to be a Philip Roth kind of day. I'll talk forever about him. I'm
Yeah.
reading now for the first time. Have you read The Breast?
I have not. I admit I have not read that one.
Okay, so that is his play off of Metamorphosis by Frank
Yes.
Kafka. Yeah, and
Yeah.
he, instead of turning into a beetle, a
Yeah.
man
Yeah. I
turns.
know the. I know. Oh, well, you should say for the listeners. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
It's a
so
giant
what?
Freudian. Yeah.
Mhm. But I'm reading that and I'm like, there's no way this could be a novel. This is a perfect novella. I mean, even if it was
Yeah.
a short story,
Yeah.
it would not have been able to give off that kind of thing. So the formatting of writing is super
Yeah.
interesting because again, you can drag something on that doesn't need to be a novel.
Yes.
Um, and you're saying it's a compliment to hear someone say, "Oh, well, this could be a novel."
Yeah, that's it. You want more? It's like that idea. I love. Let us jump to the British sitcom. Like
Mm,
that's the point. Like I love, the original British Office. Like I
yeah.
love, what are there, Faulty Towers? Are there like 13 episodes? A show can end. Like just because everyone's excited, like come up with your next show. But those extra
Mhm.
five, those jump the shark seasons, like we could be spared. Like why not
Oh, yeah.
build a perfect thing? That's all.
Again, television, I guess, it's a different thing, right? Because they have
Yeah.
seasons and they have episodes. They got to fill that
Yeah.
stuff up. I mean, Sopranos I think, is the greatest show ever made.
Yeah.
And,
I want to rewatch that. I've only
oh, do it.
Friends just did their LA Friends just did their COVID Sopranos rewatch.
Oh,
I
I
was like,
mean,
oh,
so like we talked about before, like I was born in Queens, but I grew up in northern New Jersey. I mean, I grew up where they filmed that,
yeah,
literally filmed in my backyard.
that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, there are episodes of that show where you're just kind of like, didn't have to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like they could have just, but they
yeah,
have 12 episodes. They got to do things and write
yeah,
things and,
yeah,
fill up space. And I feel like, some authors that I know, I'm a big word count guy. I don't go by pages. I don't know. And people ask me all the time, you're like, oh, how long is this book you're writing on? And I'm like, well, right now it's like 90,000, 100,000 words. And they can't see that. They can't, if you're not a
yeah,
writer,
yeah,
they see pages in
yeah,
a book. And people want to see a big, thick book and,
yeah.
with a big cover. And like, it doesn't always work that way. I mean,
And I think there's audiences for everything. Like that's the nice freeing thing. Like is you can only do your work, and that's the unique voicing and the beauty of it. Like you know, for yeah, I mean, every once in a while people want the doorstop, but then there's also like I hadn't read forever. I just never read it. I remember meeting, anyway, whole long embarrassing story. But anyway, but
wait, who
oh
did
yeah,
you meet?
like
We
oh, just in grad school, like I always say that whenever a writer's like feelings are hurt, when a friend's like, oh, that person when people are really sensitive. I just remember being like a long-haired, grad student, like, standing alone in a kitchen with Coetzee, like holding a beer and having no idea who he was. It'd be like, so you write too, bruh? Like I had
Wait, talking to who?
like J.M. Coetzee,
Oh
the
my
yeah.
God,
But I'm
dude.
saying, like, I just was 20 and I was like the indignities of, he's like, well, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm gonna win the Nobel Prize in like
Oh
eight
my God.
hours. But the point is, yeah, I finally read those. That's what I'm saying. Like I love a short novel. Like back to like, Camus, The Fall, The Plague, but I
Oh
love like
yeah.
Coetzee, those short, not like, to me, I think there's people for every person. Like, that's why you can only do your work. For every person who wants the fat book, there's someone like me who loves a tight, punchy. Like, I love a novel that should really be called a long short story. Like, I love those. I just want
Yeah.
to tight.
A great book I read recently. She's actually an SF author, and it's the same thing. It's labeled a novel, but it's really a novella. R.O. Kwan. She wrote a book called The Incendiaries.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
got it.
and it's a 200-page novel, but
Yeah,
you read it and it reads kind of like a really long short story. And she would even say in her own interview that it's not really a novel.
yeah,
But yeah, the formatting of it all is interesting, and I think as a writer, you kind of just got to know when it's done.
yeah. And you can get help with that. That's why I always also, when I'm teaching, I'm like, you know, you don't have to call it stories. Don't call it anything. Don't pick
Yeah,
a genre. Like, just build your weird,
yeah.
individual, unique, special thing. And someone else, I said the only thing not to do. I only have one tip, which is don't lie and then call it, a memoir. Like,
Ah,
just call it a novel. Like, that's the only thing. Don't represent as truth what is not true. Like, make a fictional truth, but like,
mhm.
I don't think it's that hard. And don't pretend to be who you're not. Like,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's pretty simple.
And it's an
Don't-
art form, right? So you're supposed to have fun with it. You're supposed to be able to go down places you never thought you would go and be fictional with it. But you're right. At the same time, it's like be level-headed about it and kind
yeah,
of
all I want you to do is to repeat the fun part. As you say it, I'm like taking notes here. I'm like, I'm gonna read these books that I hadn't read yet, and then also I'm like, have fun with it for the rest of my writing day. I'm already glad to talk to you, but to get reminded at the start of a writing day that I'm actually not supposed to be pulling out my hair the whole time. Maybe I'll take like 5 minutes and be like, oh yeah, riff, have
Nathan,
fun.
I love it, dude. I got to end it because I have to go to
Yeah,
work.
yeah.
It's been awesome. Can you let people know? Are you like I said? You're not on Instagram or anything like that at the
I
moment.
am on everything, but I don't do anything. But I will make sure to tell people. Yeah, maybe someone will retweet us.
Yeah. So what are your handles and what's all the stuff people can follow you
Oh, I
on?
don't even know. I think I'm Nathan Englander on Twitter, but I haven't been on in like 2 years. But I keep saying I'm going to get back to it just to
Yeah.
make my brain toxic. And I'm N Englander on Instagram, and who knows what and then yeah, I think I
Yeah.
have the Nathan on Facebook.
Okay, cool. I mean, again, I'm sure we could talk for
Yeah,
another hour. I
yeah,
hope to get you back on.
yeah.
And yeah, and your newest book was kiddish.com.
Cottage.com is the
Cottage.com.
newest one. Yeah, that's out in paper now, and yes, that's the last one.
Great. And what's going on in the future? Are you working on a new thing right now, or you kind of just you said you were doing the play, but that
Oh yeah, I have yes, the play is now not happening before
yeah,
2022, and that, which is fine. I just want everyone to be in good health, and I love,
yeah,
praying for everyone. And yes, as for art forms, rooting for the theater world. People are
big
it's in
time.
dire straits. I want wishing everyone well. And then yeah, no, I'm doing my first Audible story. I've never done a story for Audible,
Oh,
but
sweet.
yeah. So,
Are you
but
narrating it or are you writing it?
no, writing it, but that's what I'm rewriting now. So yes,
Awesome.
yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
Nathan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me.
What fun! So nice to meet you. I'm
Yeah, most
excited.
definitely. And hopefully we'll do it again. And hopefully I'll sign up for a better Zoom account.
I we can use mine anyway. Have a
All
great
right.
day at work.
Enjoy the day, man. Take
Say hi
care.
to that dog for me. Okay. All right. Bye. Oh.
Bye, bye, bye.